There is a type of person who doesn't just enter a room, they absorb it. Not the words, not the noise, but the emotions hiding underneath everything. And that is you. You feel things before they are spoken. You sense shifts in energy before faces even change. Your nervous system reacts to emotions that don't even belong to you, but somehow still live inside you. This is not imagination. This is overload. You were never taught how to separate your pain from what you absorb from others. So now you carry emotional weight that was never meant to be yours. And you call it personality. But listen carefully, this is where your life quietly splits in two. Because there is a version of you that keeps drowning in emotional chaos, and there is another version that begins to see the truth. You are not weak. You are not too sensitive. You are an emotional mirror. You reflect people back to themselves without even trying. Their sadness gets stored in your chest. Their anxiety becomes your restlessness. Their anger turns into your inner noise. And here is the brutal truth you keep avoiding. Not everyone deserves access to your nervous system, but you give it freely. Every conversation, every attachment, every emotional connection. You open the door without realizing it, and then wonder why you feel exhausted after people leave. This is not love. This is emotional contamination. And if you don't learn to recognize it now, you will spend your entire life thinking you are broken, when in reality, you were just never protected from the world you were sensitive enough to feel. There is another type of you that doesn't just feel emotions, you collect them. You walk into a space and something inside you quietly switches on. Like a sponge that no one asked to be activated. Suddenly, you are not just you anymore. You are the room. You are the tension. You are the silence between people who are pretending everything is fine. This is what you do without realizing it. You absorb stress from conversations that were never meant to enter your mind. You take in sadness from people who don't even notice their own pain. You carry emotional weight like it was assigned to you at birth, and then you call it normal. But your body knows the truth. That heaviness in your chest after social interaction, that mental fatigue after simple conversations, that sudden urge to isolate without knowing why, it is not random. It is accumulation. You are not just living your life. You are unconsciously storing the emotional leftovers of everyone you meet. And here is the part you keep ignoring. You don't know how to empty yourself, so everything stays inside, day after day, moment after moment, until your inner world becomes overcrowded with feelings that were never yours to begin with. You think you are tired, but you are actually full. And the danger is this: when an emotional absorber stays untrained, they lose the ability to recognize ownership. You start believing every emotion you feel is yours, but it's not. Some of it is borrowed, some of it is absorbed, and some of it is just lingering energy you never released. And until you learn to cleanse your internal space, you will keep drowning in emotions you never consciously chose to carry. There is a version of you that doesn't speak much, but sees everything. You are not loud in rooms. You are not demanding attention, but your mind is always moving, scanning, reading, decoding. You notice micro changes in tone that others miss. A slight pause before a sentence. A forced smile that doesn't reach the eyes. A truth hidden inside a joke. And the strange part is, you rarely know what to do with this information. So you stay silent. You observe people like they are unfolding patterns instead of personalities. You understand what they feel before they understand it themselves. But you pretend you don't know. Because knowing too much makes you feel disconnected. This is your burden. You are emotionally hyper-aware but socially restrained. You feel everything internally, but express very little externally. And over time, this creates a strange loneliness, not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of not being seen the way you see others. You start to believe that silence is your protection. So you become invisible on purpose. You listen more than you speak. You analyze more than you participate. But inside, your nervous system never rests. Because observation without release becomes pressure. You are constantly processing emotional data that no one asked you to decode. You understand people deeply, but feel misunderstood just as deeply. And here is the truth you don't admit. You are not detached. You are overwhelmed in silence. Because when an observer empath has no safe space to express what they see, they begin to carry entire emotional worlds inside a quiet mind that never stops watching. There is a version of you that doesn't just feel emo. Tians, you multiply them. Whatever enters you doesn't stay the same. Pain becomes deeper. Stress becomes heavier. Love becomes overwhelming. And fear becomes louder than it ever was in reality. You are not exaggerating your feelings. You are amplifying what you absorb. This is why your inner world often feels unstable without reason. One moment you are fine, the next moment you are emotionally flooded, and you don't even know why. But the truth is simple. You don't experience emotions at surface level. You intensify them internally. A small conflict feels like emotional collapse. A small rejection feels like abandonment. A small silence feels like disappearance. And you keep asking yourself, why do I feel so much? But the real question is not how much you feel, it is how deeply you process everything without filtering it. Your nervous system does not pause at normal intensity. It goes straight to depth, always. And because of this, you start believing your emotions are dangerous. So you try to suppress them, control them, hide them. But suppression does not reduce intensity. It traps it. And trapped emotions don't disappear, they grow. This is the cycle you keep repeating without noticing. You feel deeply, you suppress pressure builds, emotional overflow, guilt, silence, repeat. And slowly you stop trusting your own emotional reactions. But listen carefully. You are not unstable, you are unfiltered. And unfiltered emotions are not weakness, they are raw sensitivity without protection. The moment you stop judging your emotional depth, you begin to understand that your suffering was never about feeling too much, it was about having no internal boundary between what you feel and what you become. There is a version of you that cannot see brokenness without trying to repair it. You don't just notice people's pain, you feel responsible for it. The moment someone opens up, something inside you activates. A quiet urgency, a silent praise. Sure. You start thinking you understand them better than they understand themselves. You start believing that if you stay long enough, if you give enough energy, if you love hard enough, they will heal. But you are not just helping people. You are absorbing their chaos and calling it purpose. You mistake emotional rescue for emotional connection. You confuse intensity with intimacy. You confuse suffering with meaning. And this is where you lose yourself. Because the fixer empath does not know where to stop. You stay in conversations that drain you. You stay in relationships that break you slowly. You stay in situations where your nervous system is constantly in emergency mode. And still, you call it loyalty. But listen carefully. Not every broken person is your responsibility. Not every wound is yours to close. Not every silence is yours to heal. Yet you keep stepping into emotional fires like it is your job to survive them for others. And over time, you start disappearing. Inside people's problems. Your identity becomes linked with being needed. If no one is struggling, you feel useless. If no one is broken, you feel invisible. This is the trap. Because the fixer empath doesn't realize this painful truth. You are not saving people. You are replacing your own emotional needs with their unfinished pain. And the more you fix others, the more you abandon yourself. Until one day you realize you don't know who you are without someone to heal. There is a version of you that doesn't just connect with people, you merge with them. You don't feel separate from relationships, you feel inside them. When someone becomes close to you, your emotional identity starts to blur. Their moods become your moods. Their fears become your thoughts. Their silence becomes your anxiety. And slowly, you stop noticing where you end and they begin. This is not love in its healthiest form. This is emotional fusion. You don't just care about people. You enter them emotionally. Why? And that is why letting go feels like identity collapse. Because separation doesn't feel like distance to you, it feels like disappearance. So you hold on, even when it hurts, even when it drains you, even when your inner world is screaming for space. You convince yourself that closeness means survival, that emotional merging means loyalty, that detachment means abandonment, but your nervous system is paying the price. Because when you are emotionally absorbed into others, you lose internal reference points. You stop asking, how do I feel? And start asking, how do they feel about how I feel? This creates emotional confusion that never fully settles. You become reactive instead of grounded, dependent on emotional signals outside of you, constantly adjusting, adapting, reshaping yourself just to maintain connection. And here is the hidden truth you avoid. You are not afraid of losing people. You are afraid of losing the version of yourself that only exists inside relatio, friendships. But that version is not stable. It is borrowed identity. And borrowed identity always comes with emotional debt. Until you learn emotional separation, you will keep calling attachment love and calling self-loss connection. But real connection does not erase you. It reveals you. There is a version of you that is always on guard, even when nothing is happening. You don't feel safe easily. Not because the world is always dangerous, but because your nervous system is always expecting something to go wrong. So you protect yourself in advance. You overthink conversations before they even happen. You replay words that were never meant to hurt you. You read between lines that were never there. And in doing so, you live emotionally ahead of reality. This is your survival pattern. You don't wait for pain to arrive. You prepare for it. But this constant protection has a cost, because the more you try to shield yourself from emotional pain, the more you start living inside you. Emotional tension. Your mind becomes a monitoring system, always scanning for danger, always predicting betrayal, always expecting disappointment. And slowly, even peaceful moments start feeling suspicious. You can't fully relax, because relaxation feels like vulnerability. And vulnerability feels like exposure. So you stay guarded, even in love, even in silence, even in connection. But here's what you don't realize. Protection without rest becomes imprisonment. You are not just protecting your heart, you are restricting your entire emotional experience. And over time, this creates a strange paradox. You crave deep connection, but you mistrust it the moment it arrives. You want peace, but you cannot recognize it when it appears. Because your internal system is addicted to vigilance. And the hardest truth is this: you are not protecting yourself from people. You are protecting yourself from the possibility of feeling deeply again. But life cannot be fully lived in protectee. On mode. At some point, your nervous system has to learn that not every moment is a threat, and not every silence is a warning. Otherwise, you will survive everything except your own emotional life. There is a version of you that doesn't feel too much anymore. You feel almost nothing at all. But don't confuse this with peace. This is not calm. This is shutdown. Somewhere along the way, your emotional system got overwhelmed. Too much feeling, too much absorbing, too much surviving. And instead of breaking, you adapted. You turned the volume down on your own emotions just to function. Now you walk through life slightly disconnected from yourself. You still smile when expected. You still respond when needed. You still show up. But internally, there is distance. You feel like you are watching your own life instead of living it. And the scariest part? You almost got used to it. You tell yourself you are fine because nothing hurts intensely anymore. But what you don't realize is nothing feels deeply either. Joy doesn't fully land. Sadness doesn't fully break you. Love doesn't fully reach you. Everything becomes muted. This is emotional exhaustion disguised as stability. And you keep going like this because numbness feels safer than intensity. At least numbness doesn't overwhelm you. At least numbness doesn't consume you, but it also doesn't connect you. You start losing emotional language for your own inner world. You stop knowing what you need. You stop recognizing what you feel. You start living in reaction instead of awareness. And slowly, you begin to mistake survival for healing. But listen carefully. Numbness is not your identity. It is your nervous system's emergency response to overload. It is what happens when a deeply feeling system is forced to stop feeling in order to keep going. And even now, beneath the silence, your emotional world is still there, waiting, quiet, buried, not gone, just paused. Because even the numb empath is not. Empty, they are just emotionally exhausted beyond expression. And now, you arrive at the part you are always moving toward. Not another label, not another explanation, not another way to divide yourself into pieces, but awareness. Because every version you have seen so far, the mirror, the absorber, the observer, the sponge, the fixer, the merged heart, the protector, the numb one, they were never separate identities. They were adaptations. Different ways your nervous system learned to survive emotional intensity. But survival is not the same as living. And this is where something inside you begins to shift. You start to see it clearly now. You were never too much. You were never broken. You were never difficult to understand. You were uncontained sensitivity in an untrained emotional world. And that creates chaos inside a person who feels everything deeply. But here is the turning point. Awareness changes everything. Because the moment you see your patterns, why? Or are no longer fully controlled by them. You begin to notice before you absorb. You begin to pause before you merge. You begin to breathe before you fix. You begin to return to yourself before you disappear into others. And slowly, something powerful happens. You stop reacting from emotional survival and start responding from emotional clarity. You realize your sensitivity was never the problem. Lack of boundaries was. Lack of emotional separation was. Lack of inner grounding was. And now, instead of trying to become less sensitive, you begin learning how to become aware inside your sensitivity. Because the goal was never to shut your emotions down. The goal was to own them, to feel without drowning, to care without losing yourself, to love without disappearing. And this is the final truth. Your depth was never your weakness. It was your potential. And now, for the first time, you are no longer just an empath reacting to life. You are an empath awakening inside it. You have read all 9 versions of yourself, but now only one question remains. Who are you when you stop surviving people and start understanding yourself? You are not your overwhelm. You are not your emotional burnout. You are not your silence, your intensity, or your collapse. You are the awareness behind it all. And in this moment, you must decide. Will you keep living as a reaction to the world, or will you become the one who observes it without losing yourself inside it? Because the real transformation was never about becoming less sensitive. It was about becoming conscious inside your sensitivity. And once you choose awareness,